So, one of the things I've said constantly, for the past 2 years is that if we leave the EU, one of the big things that we are going to have to fight for, that we've taken for granted for so many years, is the fact that a lot of our workers' rights haven't come from our government, they've come from the EU, which has done this because of freedom of movement and being able to live and work in other countries. So ensuring that everyone has the same rights to work and protections is really important. Now, of course, Brexiteers will dismiss this out of hand, but here we have, from The Independent, 10 ways the EU protects British workers' rights. So, Theresa May has outlined plans for a so-called hard Brexit, one in which the UK leaves the EU single market and customs union. It means that many of the workers' rights that have been won over many decades will no longer be protected by EU law and could potentially be abolished at any point. According to the House of Commons Library, a substantial component of workers' rights in the UK comes from EU law. In truth, the current government is unlikely to scrap many, if any, of the rights, not because of Theresa May has a promise that workers' existing protections will be guaranteed while she's Prime Minister. The government's Great Repeal Bill will also convert all EU laws, including the ones regarding to employment rights, to the UK law, at least for now. The risk is, however easy it would be, in theory, for a future government to get rid of those rights. Many hard-fought protections could be scrapped with just one simple vote in Parliament. Others stem from decisions made by the European Court of Justice and will no longer be relevant after Brexit because of British courts will no longer have to follow the the European Court's decisions. The EU prevented any UK government from overriding workers' rights, and Brexit means that protections will no longer be there. Here are 10 of the rights that could be under threat. Limits on working hours. This is one of the ones that I've said would happen. I've told you time and time again, look at the idiot Mark Dyson, who basically said, I want to force my workers to work unpaid overtime. That's what he said before the referendum. I don't know if we've said it since, but that's one of the things he wanted out of Brexit. So, make no mistake. So, introduced in the UK in 1998, the EU working time regulations mean that employees cannot be forced to work more than an average of 48 hours a week. Workers can choose to opt out, and there are some exemptions, including emergency services workers, soldiers, servants in private households, and fishermen. But this EU law helps stop bosses from forcing their employees to work unhealthy hours. It also prevents younger people from being exploited by starting work hours under the age of 18, cannot work more than 8 hours a day or 40 hours in a week. The UK government resisted the controversial working time laws during the EU negotiations, and a future government could amend them. So, yeah, I've been laughed at by many of the Brexiteers saying that would never happen, but what do you look at that, top of the list. Time off. The Working Time Directive also made days off a legal requirement. Companies have to give staff a minimum of 48 hours off work per fortnight and at least rest time of at least 11 consecutive hours, that's 12 hours for young people, every day. This is designed to stop workers being exploited and becoming unwell because of being overworked. The rules also include protections for night workers, ensuring they cannot be worked an average of more than 8 hours a day and must be offered free health checks. Annual leave. EU rules also secure British workers' legal right to paid annual leave. According to the trade unions, and the introduction of these laws gave 6 million Britons better off rights to paid leave, including 2 million workers who had previously not been entitled to any paid leave at all. EU directives say workers must be given at least 4 weeks, that's 20 days, of paid leave per year. That is less than the UK's legal requirement of 28 days of annual leave, but the EU rules acted until now as a safeguard against any future government scrapping or reducing annual leave requirements. Equal pay. Equal pay between men and women has been enshrined in EU law since 1957. It was also part of the UK before Britain joined the EU, but in a more minimal way. The British government had refused to incorporate into law any idea that pay should be based on value, meaning that a woman doing a more valuable or senior job could legally be paid only the same as a more junior male colleague. The UK government amended this after only enforcement action by the EU Commission. So, any female Brexiteers out there, you could be losing your equal pay. So, maternity rights. The EU law guarantees women a minimum of 14 weeks maternity leave. The 1992 EU Pregnancy Workers Directive also gave women the right to time off work for medical appointments relating to their pregnancy. It was placed a duty on employers to look after pregnant women, including putting them on paid leave if the nature of their work was unsuitable during pregnancy. For example, if it was overly physical or potentially dangerous. The European Court of Justice has made it clear any discrimination towards a woman because of her pregnancy or maternity leave is sexism and should be treated as such. The ECJ also ruled that employers must give women on maternity leave the same contractual rights as they do to any other employees, for example by continuing to pay into pension schemes. Parental leave. EU law says parents must be allowed to take 18 weeks of unpaid leave from work to look after a child. It also says workers must be allowed additional time off for family reasons such as an ill child. Anti-discrimination laws. The UK laws banning discrimination on grounds of age, religion or sexual orientation come directly from the EU's Equal Treatment Directive. EU laws have also been made easier for people claiming discrimination to get justice by placing the burden of proof in the discrimination cases on the alleged perpetrator rather than the alleged victim. Compensation for discrimination victims. Under EU law, there is no cap on amount an employer found guilty of discrimination can be ordered to pay in compensation. This could be changed after Brexit. The last government commissioned a report on an employment law by venture capitalist Adrian Beecham that recommended introducing a cap on compensation payments for discrimination. Until now, EU laws have prevented the UK government ministers from doing so. Critics say the current law can be crippling for employers, but others say that it is a reasonable reflection of the huge consequences discrimination can have. Agency workers protection. So, if you work for an agency, you are also protected. The EU rules adopted in 2008 say temporary workers must be treated equally to directly employed staff being given access to the same amenities or collective facilities. They also say EU member states should also do more to improve agency workers' access to training and childcare facilities. Those regulations are not popular with employers and were resisted by the UK government during the EU negotiations. They could be some of the first EU rules to be scrapped post-Brexit. Health and safety. The EU's Health and Safety Framework Directives forces employers to assess and to act to reduce workplace risks. Other rules cover issues such as disabilities, noise and specific regulations for staff working with chemicals, asbestos or other potential hazards. The TUC says that 41 of the 65 new health and safety regulations introduced in the UK between 1997 and 2009 came from EU laws. So, I hope you're ready to fight losing those laws, Brexiteers, because now you have left all those laws that you have benefited from, thanks to the EU, not the UK government, could now be gone like that. And I'm just going to point this out. You do not see Jacob Rees-Mogg up arguing that things like, for example, limits on working hours, time off, annual leave, equal pay, maternity rights, parental leave, anti-discrimination laws, compensation for discrimination victims, agency worker protections, health and safety. You do not see Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson arguing that these should be protected. In fact, they're strangely silent about that. I wonder why. And also, Nigel Farage. You also don't see him talking about these, do you?